This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 209 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jared Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, welcome back. We took a week off again.
We did. We, it's funny that we went through basically doing every week during the pandemic, and now that theaters are open and stuff, we're back to taking weeks off again.
Well, I mean, this is the first. Last week was sort of a half-assed open theater week.
Mm-hmm.
This week is like everyone's back.
Yeah.
And one of the movies we're going to talk about, Quiet Place Part 2, seems to be the one to be doing it. With John Krasinski like making a whirlwind tour across the country, welcoming people back to theaters, ending up here in Austin, which I didn't realize the first A Quiet Place premiered at South by.
Yeah, it did.
I totally missed that somehow. I think that was the year I took off. That I didn't actually go because it was 2018.
Yeah, it might have been.
But yeah, it seems like everyone has headed back to the theater at this point. To see A Quiet Place Part 2 at the press screening was my first time back in the theater since March of 2020. I can't say it was any different. You know, they had remodeled the theater since I had been there, so it was actually pretty nice. But
yeah,
you know, we'll see.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happened. Like, is it only going to be for bigger tentpole or franchise movies, or are we going to start seeing people show up for your mid-level stuff and see the box office bounce back a little bit? Are you going to see box office surprise hits in the way that you did previously? Like, what's going to happen, for example, with like The Conjuring next week when it's an HBO Max release as well? You saw a little bit with Cruella in the box office was lower than A Quiet Place, and had the Disney Premiere access option. So, I don't know. I think that it just, this definitely seems like the week that movies are back, quote unquote.
Right.
But I don't know if they're back for good. I guess we'll see. Hey, now masks are optional at all the major chains. So,
at the press screening, we had to wear a mask. We had a temperature check. The poor rep, a dude named Hai, he had to check everyone's temperature. I'm sure it's not what he ever thought he'd be doing, but it was a much smaller crowd, and I don't know if that was. I honestly don't know if they turned people away, because there wasn't a lot of people waiting outside, or weren't a lot of people waiting outside.
It was not press only. It was open to the public as well.
Yeah, it was a press and promo screening, because I couldn't make the actual press screening, so this was a press promo screening. So there were people waiting outside, which is something I haven't obviously seen in over a year. So I'm really curious as to if they actually did turn away. Anyway,
were they enforcing social distancing?
No, but everyone kind of did it anyway.
That's good.
Like first of all, it's a bigger. They've since remodeled the theater. This is the Galaxy Highland here in Austin, where we do a lot of press screenings. They remodeled this particular theater to have the wider reclining seats. So they're naturally a little further apart. You're not sharing an armrest, so to speak, with the person next to you. But then, there were everyone was kind of naturally social distancing, which was nice. It wasn't, I never felt too cramped. These press screenings typically are, especially with the public, are really just cram everyone in to the point where, it doesn't. You can't hardly move, and especially some of these older theaters where, the seating is very narrow. I think you came to one here at the Regal, where we saw Star Wars, or was it?
Yeah,
Avengers. Yeah. It's very cramped.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. I was the same theater, so yeah, it was extremely uncomfortable. The one we saw Avengers Endgame in was particularly uncomfortable because it wasn't even like stadium seating. It was just like like shitty sloped seating that you couldn't move your knees. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
like
I could because I'm smaller, but
like going to the Quarry in San
Yeah.
Antonio.
yeah.
I don't. Has the Quarry been remodeled ever? I haven't been
No.
back. Okay.
No, it's still the same terrible seating arrangement.
Well,
There's people who love that theater. I don't understand.
sorry. I, it. I don't know that I've ever seen a movie in the Quarry theater other than in that main, like, end one they always do the press screenings in.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think we did didn't we do what was that thing?
We did Step Brothers there.
Yes, that's it. What was that program called?
Tug.
Yeah. I think we saw that in a smaller theater.
Tug.
Yeah, it had like 2 people show up, maybe.
We had enough so it used to be you had to have a certain number of people buy tickets to make the event go. So we had at least like enough to cover the cost of renting the theater and booking the movie. But
yeah, it was a good time. Anyway, so yeah, we'll see if everyone gets sick or. I think if this weekend goes off fine, and like there's no huge spikes or anything, then I think the United States will more officially say like, "Yay, we're done with everything."
Yeah.
So we'll see. Anyway, moving on. Some big news this week. This had been rumored for a couple of weeks, or at least a week. Amazon is buying MGM, the studio behind the James Bond films, and not much else, if I'm being honest. A lot of television stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of television. I think it's something like 4,000 movies and 17,000 TV shows in the catalog.
Yeah.
So it also, So I mean, I think the big thing is that there are some properties that it allows it to mine for the IP for potential, movies or TV series. Like, if they want to reboot the Pink Panther, if they want to do something with Rocky, they have access to do that.
Legally Blonde, Barbershop.
Yeah. And then on the TV side, Fargo, Handmaid's Tale, and Vikings are all MGM. Tomb Raider, they can
Shark
do another
Tank.
Tomb Raider. RoboCop.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've talked about this before, but I think most of the 1986 library is owned by Warner Brothers. A lot of it is distribution wise. So like The Wizard of Oz is probably the most famous MGM movie ever, and maybe Gone with the Wind is Gone with the Wind. MGM, I don't know, but there's a lot of that stuff that now just runs through Warner Brothers, which sucks. But anyway, yeah. So this is a big deal by Amazon. I guess most notably is that the James Bond stuff will remain theatrically released moving forward. But what are your thoughts? Do you have any memory of MGM? Do you have any fondness for MGM at all?
Not really. No, not really. I was trying to think about it if I could think of anything that really stuck out, but no. I've liked MGM movies, but it's not as if it was a studio that I was ever, really looking forward to the next thing that they did. It's almost like the Bond part of this whole thing is a little bit overblown because of like the limitations that it's actually going to have with it. And I'm pretty sure that Barbara Broccoli could squash a Bond TV series if she wanted to, because I think they have enough creative control over that franchise that they may be able to step in and prevent that from happening. It is interesting from the standpoint of seeing what happens with Amazon films that come directly to the platform. I think they've been doing a pretty okay job at original films and programming, and it's strange to me that they would look to enhance via this rather than put all that money into like their own studio and maybe making their own stuff. But I guess if you're trying to win the streaming wars, it's a matter of volume of content, and they certainly are adding a shit ton of content. And honestly, the thing that may benefit them a little is that HBO Max gets great publicity for their library of content, and among cinephiles and movie fans, they're considered to have the best library of stuff, and so they have actually the most stuff that was created pre like 2000 or something like that. Netflix barely has any, and this gives Amazon a potential catalog of older films that can attract a different audience to streaming. So there is that piece that is somewhat interesting, but I don't know that this thing like moves the needle in any significant way for Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that IP is pretty dated. I mean, the Rocky stuff is still going with Creed, and but like the Pink Panther, like no one's cared about that in 50 years. They had the Steve Martin reboots, but
travesty.
Sorry, man. I know you love the Blake Edwards.
I do love the Peter Sellers Pink Panther. It's great.
Oh, do you really? I haven't.
Yeah.
I've actually. I don't know that I've ever seen one all the way through.
It's great.
Aren't they pretty racist at times too? I mean, of course, because it's the 60s.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think everything from that time period probably comes with your fair share of casual racism.
What so what drew you to the Pink Panther movies?
Like grandparents were big
Okay.
fans, and then which meant that my parents were big fans. So watching through them, like my grandfather was a huge Pink Panther fan. So
Oh, okay. That makes my parents never. My dad watched like trucker movies, like Convoy. And I know more Chuck Norris movies than I do Blake Edwards and Peter Sellers movies.
mm-hmm.
I think maybe the most interesting thing is if something comes out of this, like a Rocky TV series, or
Right.
Legally Blonde, or any of this other IP that might exist. Maybe a RoboCop. I don't know. I mean, just none of this stuff strikes me as particularly valuable. But I'm curious if this changes like acquisition for Amazon, since they've been picking up stuff like Paramount's cast-offs for some reason.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like Amazon right now is a bottomless pit of money, and I think that I feel like they're spending so much money acquiring these movies from Paramount, and MGM is not exactly a prolific studio either, and so it's not as if there's a huge calendar of MGM movies coming out in the near future that they can bank on. So I don't know. I have trouble understanding how much of it is IP, how much of it is previous and old libraries, how much of it is future stuff, because it's such a weird studio to acquire, I think. Not to say it's like small potatoes or anything, but also, again, how many movies has MGM put out in the last 5 years,
Right. And I mean, it's always been stuff that like, I think they did they do Bill and Ted? I mean, that's Orion. I don't know if that's a subsidiary anymore. I mean, it's a weird thing. And I think the only big marquee thing is Bond anymore. And that's really more of a distribution thing. So,
yeah. So I'm looking at MGM. They have a shitload of stuff, in the olden days. But if you look, wait, why is it this? Oh, here we go. Sorry. The Wikipedia was acting up.
I'm editing it right now. That's why.
Oh shit, that's what's happening. Yeah, so like in since 2000 and let's say 15, like there's a lot of like partnership with other studios and stuff, but like significant stuff like that's like franchise stuff that could make money. Like they released the Tomb Raider reboot. A Star Is Born was theirs. Fighting with My Family was a good one. But like
that was a WWE co-production too.
Yes, yeah. And then 2020 they just had Valley Girl, and then 2021
they remade Valley Girl. I have no idea.
Yes, they did.
Okay, weird.
But I think it was like a musical or something. And then like they have a lot of stuff on the 2021 calendar, but like, does anything look? I mean, they've got Candyman later this year. Which could be something, and then they've got that Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, House of Gucci movie. So who knows?
And
they got the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Oh, well, there you go. They don't own any of like their animated stuff anymore. That's all Warner Brothers. Like Tom and Jerry started out as MGM. Not that that's making a killing for Warner Brothers at this point. But
Yeah, and I wonder because MGM does a lot of like co-production stuff that's distributed by other, like you're saying, with Warner Brothers. So I wonder even how much of this stuff even is part of the deal.
that's what I mean. Is like the movies from pre whatever 1986, according to this, that's all owned by Warner Brothers. It's all like Ted Turner owns those, and then that's part of Warner Brothers now. So it's like that's all like again, Wizard of Oz is a Warner Brothers property. The Gone with the Wind is a Warner Brothers thing. All that stuff from the classic era of Hollywood it belongs to Warner Brothers now. You can't they can't IP create something off the IP of The Wizard of Oz, the film. It's just it's a weird deal. It's a weird deal, but who knows?
Yep.
I mean, so long as they get my shit here in a day or whatever, that's all I care about. Prime Video's a bonus. Anything else before we move on?
No, let's get to it.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
First up, we have A Quiet Place Part 2. This is, of course, the sequel to A Quiet Place, which we talked a little bit about earlier. This originally was supposed to be released, I believe, March of 2020, because it had its world premiere before the pandemic, and I believe there were already reviews of it out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, some press had seen it.
But this was, of course, shelved until now because of the pandemic, and now it's here. And Cody, tell us about A Quiet Place Part 2 and what you think of it.
Sure. So, I mean, it's difficult to discuss plot with it because it really is just sort of like a continuation of the first film.
It's like immediately afterward.
Yeah. So it is that there's these monsters that are there that are sensitive to sound and so they must be quiet. And they're trying to survive. That's basically it. It's Emily Blunt has 3 kids, and then John Krasinski's character comes back. Spoiler alert: doesn't make it through the first one, and comes back in a little bit of a prologue in this one, and then it kind of so they show day one, which that scene was whatever. I mean, it's ostensibly a way to introduce Cillian Murphy's character. So like it doesn't really add anything new to the mix other than kind of confirming that these are aliens. Right, exactly. And so once it gets started, you start seeing that this. So basically, one of the kids played by Noah Jupe gets injured, and they find an old like family friend they had, played by, like I said, Cillian Murphy, and so he's sort of like struggling to. He says he can't help them. He can't do anything for them. And then the girl played by Millicent Simmons finds a way to. There's potentially a way that they can get to safety that she discovers. And so, it kind of becomes this thing where, she runs off and then Cillian Murphy goes out to find her. And then they end up going on that while Emily Blunt is trying to take care of Noah Jupe's injury and kind of keep her and her other 2 kids safe. I don't remember too much about A Quiet Place. I saw it, back when it came out and thought it was fine, a decent horror movie. I'm not, the biggest horror movie fan, but, finding it tense and finding some, a somewhat interesting take on, if not a little dumb at times, take on sort of like the idea of, playing with sound and stuff like that. And this movie, I think is effective. I think that it's effectively tense. I think there it has maybe a couple of pacing problems in there, towards the middle of the movie where I think it might kind of stretch out the tension maybe just a tad too much for my liking. But I think, by far, the Cillian Murphy and Millicent Simmons stuff is the best stuff in the movie. And I think, far superior to the Emily Blunt stuff. And I think Krasinski knows that as a director, and maybe to a fault spends too much time with them, because it really becomes their movie for most of the second half of it. And I think that's the best stuff. It's really sort of setting up Millicent Simmons as being like a very strong, independent character, and very smart and very and very brave. And I really like the relationship that forms there. How he's really reluctant to do much of anything. She's the one who kind of has to be the brave one who's trying to save her family. And get to safety. And so, I think it plays off of, some jump scares. It plays off some surprising stuff. And it is a little jump scare cheaty when it's having to do with sound, but at least it does it in a way that makes sense, right? Where everything is quiet for a reason. And then you have, some sort of sound that can, raise the tension. And so I think that part is effective. I think that the weird thing about it, and I mentioned this to you in a chat, is that to me, the whole thing feels structured like a TV pilot, because it sort of like presents itself with an intro and then has like a self-contained like bottled story, and then it fucking ends just like an episode of TV would end. The ending is not, to me, the ending is very frustrating because it makes you go, okay, so this was a setup movie. This was just a movie to get us to part 3, which is a really frustrating thing. You and I talk about it all the time with the Marvel stuff, when movies just kind of serve as a setup. That being said, I do think that what's in there is pretty decent. I can nitpick it a lot. I can say that a lot of the Emily Blunt stuff, like I said, is a lot weaker. There's other kind of bits of nitpick of like, Noah Jupe's character having a bit of inconsistency in terms of his bravery and having that kind of turn. And then there's also a section where they stumble across some other people that just kind of, it's really not very satisfying. And especially, they get like a pretty, decently well-known actor to play a part. That is just kind of like a half-assed kind of written thing. So it's a somewhat mixed bag, but I'm mostly positive about it, and I think I'm mostly positive on the strength of like its effective tension building. I think that it kind of really wraps you. Its use of sound makes it a very visceral experience, and I think that that's the best thing it has going for it.
To be fair to the film, and for whatever reason, I never saw the first film when it was released, and my wife and I finally watched it the weekend before we went to see this. So to be fair to the comparison to a TV pilot, the first one does end on a cliffhanger too. Like it immediately ends. So it's kind of par for the course. But I do see what you're saying. I think the biggest issue I have with it is the Emily Blunt stuff. It kind of forgets about how much time is passing with that character and what exactly is happening to go focus on Cillian Murphy and Madison. I'm sorry, what is her name? I forget. Millicent Simmons. Anyway, it feels like the movie should have just left the Emily Blunt character behind with no peril. To me, because it feels like it should more be about this two-person film. And that's the biggest difference, I think, from the first film, is that it splits everyone up storyline-wise, and they never come back together. And then the part you mentioned where you're introduced to this group of other people, first of all, the motivation for getting there is kind of dumb, in that it's a dumb mystery. Mm-hmm. And again, when you get there, and I mentioned this to you before, it felt like Lost.
Yeah.
Wherein like there's...
It looked like Lost.
It looked like Lost and felt like Lost.
I was like, did they just find the Dharma Initiative?
Yeah, is this the others? No, but it's the idea that there was like a hidden clue. I think the mythology of this stuff can get a little dumb.
Yeah.
The visceral sort of like, hey, they can hear, they're tracked by sound. You got to be quiet. Like, that's a great setup, but I think anything that tries to explore that mythology gets a little dumb. And it so much so in the first film, the solution is the daughter is deaf and has a cochlear implant, and Krasinski's character tries to fix it and ends up fucking it up, and it produces some sort of feedback that disrupts the alien sonar. I don't know what you would call it, but they don't like it.
Yeah.
So they're using this as a weapon, which, the Navy probably should have figured out. The military probably should have, once they figured out it was sound, they should have been quick work of these aliens, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, once you get to the idea that that is the goal, is for her to take this hearing aid and turn it into like a weapon of mass destruction for these things, it gets a little stupid. And I'm okay with that, but the movie takes itself very seriously about its stupidity. So that's where it suffers a little bit for me. But I do think it's another good chapter in this series. I don't know what the point of the prologue was, the flashback, other than to get John Krasinski in the movie again. I don't know. Because it doesn't really do anything except introduce Cillian Murphy, who didn't need to be a family friend.
I don't think so. No,
plot wise, but I think he does a really good job, and I like him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of a tortured soul, and there's a lot of like creepy things about the way he lives. But overall, I think it's a decent continuation. I think it's the good far outweighs any of the kind of bad, and I think the bad is just really only kind of dumb mythology stuff, and then the idea that Emily Blunt's character apparently is fighting off one of these things for 24 hours or something while the rest of the movie goes on. So yeah, losing track of her time was not ideal, but I think it's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what's your grade for A Quiet Place Part 2, Cody?
So based on what I remember, I would say that I think Part 2 is better than Part 1 for me. And I gave Part 1 a B minus, so I'm going to give this a B.
I'm going to give this a B also. I think I'd probably give Part 1 a B as well. I think I enjoyed them about the same. The first one is it's very effective, and it kind of hit the mainstream really well. And I think that it's one of the more and I don't know why I'd never seen it, but I had no idea that the sound design was so cool. Not as interesting as something like Sound of Metal, but there's still a lot of cool sound design in it. With the deaf character. But yeah. Anyway.
And this will be on Paramount Plus on, I believe, June 12th, 15 days after it comes out in theaters. It should be out.
Is it 15? I thought it was 45.
Oh, you know what? Because the bigger movies have the longer thing amount. Yeah. I'm gonna double check on that. But yeah, it's going to be on Paramount Plus soon.
Yeah, sometime midsummer you should be able to see this. So, but it is in theaters now if you want to go take a look. Anyway, let's move on to our next movie, Cruella. origin story for Cruella de Vil, who you may know as the sort of amoral villain of 101 Dalmatians, who wanted to turn 101 Dalmatian puppies into a coat. So, but this is a Disney, one of those Disney origin things, sort of like, obviously the closest comparison is Maleficent. But this is a bit of a different film than that. Cody, tell us about Cruella and what you thought of it.
Yeah, it's difficult to call it an origin story because it almost feels like a bit of a reimagining of the character.
Oh, it's a 100%. Yeah, this is not the same. This is not the same Cruella who ends up wanting to skin puppies.
It's not, and I think probably a bit to its detriment. Because it ends up, and I'll get into it later, but it ends up sort of making me wonder what the hell this thing is actually. So it takes a story that I don't think Cruella de Vil's origin story was ever like gone into.
She's just a villain. She's just a villain. I mean, that's the thing is like it's based on a kid's book, and she's just a villain. It's just this cartoonish villain, and that's all it ever was.
Yeah, so it's sort of set in the world of like, she ends up becoming like an orphan as a child, and due to circumstances that you may have been seeing online, that
really blew up in the kind of commentary of it, because we watched this like a week ago or so, and I was like, oh, that's a weird sort of thing to happen, and then like everyone who's seen the movie is really gripped onto that one as the kind of stupid thing that happens.
Yeah. And then she hooks up with this band of kids who are thieves, and she kind of becomes she starts living in like a house with them, and it's just they don't have like parents or anything. It's just like a house of kid thieves. But she has aspirations to be like a fashion designer, and so as she grows up, she essentially cons her way into putting herself up to and this is played by Emma Stone, of course, to go to a fashion designer played by Emma Thompson. And so the thing kind of goes from there, and I think a lot of people are making a lot of comparisons to like The Devil Wears Prada, and I think that's appropriate. And then I think that it needed to lean into that way more, because I think that it's at its most fun when it is in that Devil Wears Prada space, where it's like, Emma Thompson plays like a really cutthroat, mean, fashion designer, and Emma Stone's playing like the underling, kind of character. And I think it really works. I think that's the part of the movie that works the best. But then in like the middle of the movie, Emma Stone's character, Cruella's character, her motivations take a 180-degree shift, and the rest of the movie just becomes about revenge. And to me, that was far less interesting of a story to me. I think that areas of success, costume design, obviously really great. The look and the style, it's a very sleek, very stylish movie. Taking place, I guess it's supposed to be taking place in what, like the 70s?
It's the 70s, yeah, like 70s London. It's supposed to be, like, I've seen a lot of comparisons to, like, the birth of punk rock, and I believe, I forget, the character Artie is supposed to be sort of that, like, forefront of it. Disney's quote first gay character who never gets to proclaim their sexuality and never gets any sort of identification that they're gay, except like, oh yeah, we told him that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's the major problem with all of that stuff.
It's literally happens every single time.
Yeah, it's never actually on screen.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think when it gets to the revenge stuff, it gets a little bit less interesting to me. There are, this might be an over-exaggeration, but like 800 musical needle drops in the film, where to me it was fucking exhausting. Every scene has some sort of like 60s or 70s, pop or rock song in it. Like, it starts and ends with Rolling Stones, and there's all kinds of shit in there. And I just don't understand why every single scene needed some sort of musical cue to it. So I know a lot of people are talking about how good the soundtrack in it. I think, Jared, you said that there's like 37 actual needle drops.
Yeah, I believe one review I read counted 37. I don't know if that's fact. That's just a count that I saw, and I would totally believe that because there are a ton.
It's a ton. I had trouble understanding why her friends were going along with everything for such a long time because
you know those are the characters from the film, right?
I haven't seen the film in
those are her henchmen.
Years. Yeah.
So it's retconning these henchmen, Jasper and Horace, whose literal last name is Baden. They were supposed to be brothers. Obviously, these aren't brothers. They were her henchmen, and then like it's retconned them into being like the orphans that took her in. So
gotcha. Okay.
And you know they seem to be like decent-hearted guys.
Yes. And I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
It also fumbles Kirby Howell-Baptiste, who has her character has no reason to be in this movie
except for the very last scene.
Except for the very last scene. But here's the issue I think that it has is that I don't understand the movie because like I think you can have a movie that is like an origin story for a villain, or you can even have like an anti-hero character, but Cruella is like the sympathetic protagonist of this movie. And like you said, her henchmen are like kind-hearted people that you're like rooting for in a way. And like if this is meant to be an origin story of like a vicious Disney villain canonically, what the fuck? Like what's going on? Like I don't understand the like she is straight up the protagonist. She's not even the antagonist of or the villain of her own movie. Like she's the person you're ostensibly rooting for. So it's very confusing as to what this is because, you know, if you are to believe that this is the same character that, you know, wants to skin Dalmatians for a coat, like there's so much dog stuff in this movie. Like there's a bunch of like, and I don't know if they're trying to soften the blow by the fact that she has a dog and they use a dog for their robberies and stuff or whatever, but I just don't get it.
Well, so yeah, the movie seems to be trying to have that both ways. Look, what you've read online, and this is the thing that's everyone we were talking about earlier. Dalmatians kill her mom.
Yes.
Like that's literally what happens.
Wait, hold on. They push her off a cliff.
They push her off a cliff. Yeah. So the idea that she could become this puppy skinner, and like there's another plot point later in the film where like they think Emma Thompson's character, the Baroness, thinks that she's killed her dogs, and that's really as close as it ever gets. But yeah, I don't. The weird part is I actually kind of liked the movie. Like it's like you mentioned, it's stylish. It's got a great look. I think Emma Stone and Emma Thompson are really good. I really like Paul Walter Hauser's character. I think he's funny and endearing. If this were any movie other than a Cruella movie, like I think it'd be a lot more fun. Like if this was just some sort of random, you know, comedy thing set in the 70s fashion world, it would be so much better. But connecting it to this villain who's only villainous, there's no gray area with Cruella de Vil. It becomes this thing that doesn't really make any sense. Like again, we've asked this, and I've seen a lot of people ask this, and it's a valid question. I think, who is it for? You know, this isn't really a kids movie because it's very much set in this like very identifiably 70s London that probably didn't exist, but kind of takes this pastiche of things and puts them all together. It's dark at times. You know, again, Dalmatians push her mother off a cliff, and you know there's talk of like murdering people. And I don't really understand what the idea behind this film is as a Disney film. You know, like I said, if this were anything else, if this were the same plot line, but it wasn't DeVille, I think it'd be kind of, you you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I don't know why it had to be attached to this character.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if this was some original character that had and you played off of like the split personality kind of dual personality thing, it would have been, it would have made more sense first and foremost, but also, it would have been an interesting take on that kind of thing. And I don't I don't think there's anything identifiable, again, like you said. Like I just don't see how this has any DNA footprint of that film or that franchise or anything like that. And again, like I said, I just, I agree with you that Emma Stone and Emma Thompson are both good. I think the performances are good. I think I kind of appreciated that it wasn't necessarily, clearly geared towards children. I think it's specifically not geared towards children, if anything. But like I said, when you get to the sort of transformation she has in the middle of the film to Cruella, to me, everything that follows there is far less interesting, motivation wise, like execution. And I was, by the end of the movie, I was just not into it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big turn that happens where she just kind of starts acting like an asshole for no particular reason.
Right.
And, the other characters start calling her on it. Yeah, I mean, it feels... I'm trying to think of another film that does the same thing. Because I feel like there is one where a character sort of slips into this alter ego and alienates everyone around them. And the closest thing I can come up with is Teen Wolf. Which I don't know if that makes any sense, but he's have you ever seen Teen Wolf?
No, I've seen bits and pieces, but I never seen
so the idea is that he becomes this badass who takes down all of his enemies, and everyone starts to hate him. All of his friends start to hate him, and it's about the first one. He just gets really good at basketball. I don't know what's happening with in the 80s that way, but yeah, it feels like it. Again, why is this a Cruella movie? Why is this connected to that at all? Because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like, I got Maleficent, even though I didn't really care for the movie. I got where it was coming from because it was telling another side of a story and had some redemption arc. But this is just literally like, she'd have to have like a real psychotic break in the next couple years for this to make any sense as a prequel to 101 Dalmatians. Even a sort of reimagined 101 Dalmatians.
Right. Well, and also again, making her a sympathetic character and is it's certainly a take, I guess.
Well, yeah, for this, I mean, for a villain story, from a story that's supposed to be about a villain. Right. But I mean, I think if this wasn't about a villain, I think it'd be fine. And to reiterate, I actually kind of liked the movie. Like, I didn't have any big problems with it, but it's just a weird creature on its own. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what's your grade for Cruella?
Didn't pass the muster for me, so I'm giving it a C+.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a B. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It's really long. I think that's probably the biggest problem. Really it's over 2 hours long. But yeah, it's a weird movie, all things considered. But it is available now. It's in theaters and on Disney Plus with Premier Access, meaning it's gonna cost you $30 to watch it. All right, let's move on to our last movie, Plan B.
Right now, puberty is telling you to step on the gas.
If your vagina was a car, what would it be? Ferrari.
Stays covered up and completely untouched in the garage.
Mine would definitely be a Transformer. You think you know her? Boom. Autobots pop out.
I feel like if you're following the metaphor, that means you have crabs.
What?
We finally tried reverse cowgirl.
And amazing, right? It wasn't that great for me, but I feel like it looked cool.
Girls are horse fucking and I haven't even had my first kiss. Oh, fuck. Look at Hunter. Who plays hockey in a cardigan? He's like an athletic librarian.
You know, Sunny's throwing a party.
Really?
Love a good high school party with the liquors and the touching, all the other stuff, drugs.
Big night for you. Inviting your crush?
Partying and drinking. I feel so stimulated. Is this what white privilege feels like?
Hey, good choices.
Oh, fuck.
Lupe? I had sex.
What?
You banged your crush at your own party? You are my hero.
Oh, God. I was peeing and a condom fell out.
What?
kind of full of goo.
Let's get the Plan B pill.
Is there an alternative?
You mean a Plan B?
So this is a comedy film, kind of another in the line of films, obviously compared to something like Booksmart. Two females in a more of a profane comedy than you expect, I think, based on past experiences. Anyway, whatever. It's from the guys who made Harold and Kumar. Also, they're producers on Cobra Kai, Hayden Schlossberg and Josh Heald. This is a Hulu film directed by Natalie Morales, an actress, her directorial debut. Anyway, Cody, tell us about Plan B and what you thought of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's her debut technically in terms of release, but she also made a movie that was out South by Southwest that she made during a shutdown of making this movie. So she kind of has so she made language lessons with Mark Duplass during when this movie was delayed, and then it premiered at South by Southwest before this one. So I don't know, like, canonically what her debut will technically be. If you count the one that premiered at a festival first or the one that premiered, Anyway, this was designed to be her premiere. So basically, you got all the synopsis you need, I think, from that clip, which is it follows these two girls, one played by Kuho Verma and one played by Victoria Morales, and they essentially need to find the Plan B pill, and it is not as easy as it probably should be, and this sends them on a wild goose chase for that pill. I think Booksmart is a good comparison. I think it's also sort of in the vein of like Blockers, where it's like a group or some like good females like acting bad, that kind of thing, like young teen good girls acting bad kind of thing. Although one of the characters, I guess, doesn't really qualify for that, but the main one does. So it's pretty, like you said, it's pretty vulgar and raunchy, which I think works to its benefit at some parts. At some parts, I think it works to its detriment because I think it might be too much. There's one scene in particular that might be a little.
Talking about the Moses Storm scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just you gotta tamp those thoughts down, Cody. It's it's nothing to be intimidated by.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah. So I think that the film really gets by on the strength of the two main characters here. I think that it is at times really funny. I think the dialogue is pretty sharp throughout most of the film. I think that maybe the parts that don't work as well are some of those physical comedy bits. Like there's a scene where like Edie Patterson shows up and plays a super weird character. That, like,
I love Edie Patterson. I do
too, but it felt like it's again just like some of the stuff is just bizarre for the sake of being bizarre kind of thing.
Feels like a very improvised scene.
Yeah. Or then you'll get like the scene that I was just referencing, or like there's a scene at a party later where it just feels like it leans too heavy. Like I think it needs to be like 10 to 15% like less zany and kind of like gross out buddy comedy humor, because I think at the core of it is a really sweet story, and I think a really great relationship, and honestly a great representation like piece. Like there's a lot of really interesting representation happening with not only the casting of the movie but the characters and the way that it explores sexuality and stuff. So I think all of that is really solid. I think both of the actresses are really funny and really good in it. And I think again the relationships at the center of it, outside of that, like their romantic relationships, also work out pretty well in terms of execution. I think that, again, like I said, I think it just gets a little bit too caught up with making it so extreme at times that I wish it would have just been more subtle. Like I think a more subtle, like less reliance on like those big crazy moments, and I think you would have had a better movie. Though I did think that it was decent enough.
Yeah, I agree to a point. I liked some of the zany stuff, I guess, a little more than you did. I think the biggest problem I have is it doesn't really feel sustained. Like it feels like I don't know what happens in the first like 20, 30 minutes. There were like a day passes in the movie time, and then it kind of slows down to a crawl of like just hour by hour. So it feels like there's some pacing issues that I think are a little that kind of crop up right away, because it really goes kind of all out right in the first act. Like you have the major party where it feels like that would be something that would build up to in another film. I don't think there's any problem with it overall. I just feel like it might be missing a little something to make it as special as it could be. You know, I think, you know, Booksmart is kind of the mold for this, I think, obviously, and I think it's not a bad role, you know, thing to live up to. I don't think it ever quite is as self-assured as that movie is. And, you know, representation-wise, it does a really good job, I think. But I think it might spend a little too much. Like once you meet Victoria Morales' love interest, the movie kind of comes to a stop and doesn't really seem to acknowledge that. I don't know. It just feels like a weird thing in the relationship between these two girls that would become an issue.
Well, I agree. But sort of in a different way, in that I think that the movie is lacking some conflict between them.
Yeah.
I don't know that it has enough conflict that drives a wedge in between them, because these movies, you know, even if you look to like Superbad, which is probably the blueprint for all of this stuff in a way, at least in modern times, you know, the reason that movie works is because the wedge that's driven in between, you know, Jonah Hill and Michael Cera in that movie, over girls and stuff like that. So the relationship between these two is relatively conflict free, and any conflict comes in like lies of omission, basically. Yeah. And I don't know that I don't know that creates for like a great arc between them, because they just end up being like really close friends. And I wish there was a little bit more conflict there, especially considering what happens over the course of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I just think it's missing something, and I don't know what it is. But I think the cast is great. I like the two leads. You know, and then it's got the supporting. You know, like I said, Edie Patterson shows up and is funny. Moses Storm has a very profane part. You know, and Jay Chandrasekhar's in it for a split second, playing kind of a. He plays a pharmacist, and I think there's a funny running joke in there that Kuho Verma's character makes about the Indian mafia that has actually funny payoff later in the film. But I do think it wraps up a little too quickly too, and a little too conveniently. But I think overall,
that's actually a great point, because I feel like there's some legit catharsis that could be happening in the last chapter here, that just kind of very quickly wraps up.
Yeah. Anyway, what's your grade for Plan B?
I'm going to give it a B-. I think that it's good enough to recommend. I don't think that it lives up to what the potential is of the movie, but I still think that it's like, you know, it's funny enough to enjoy, and I think the performances of the two actresses are really enjoyable.
Yeah, I think a B- is about the same for me too. I do think there's something missing. I don't know what it is, but I think it's just missing something to make it really, really something kind of wall-to-wall funny from beginning to end. But it is available on Hulu right now if you'd like to watch that. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, Cody, we have...
You know, we might take the week off. The big opening movie is The Conjuring, and I'm going to level with all of our listeners here. I've never seen a Conjuring movie, and I don't feel like catching up.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
I saw the first one. I don't know how many there are after that.
I think this is the third, if I'm not mistaken.
No, because there's one about the doll.
Right, there's a spin-off. I think this is the third, of the main. It's not not including the universe of it. I think there's 3 movies total.
You know what's funny about that doll? So like this is based on a true story. Those who I can't remember their names. The couple that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga play they're real people. And the doll itself, like in the movie, is this like creepy porcelain doll, but in real life, the doll was like a Raggedy Ann doll, which is way less menacing.
So, oh my God. Okay, so sorry, but this is the third in the Conjuring series of like the main series. It is the 8th movie in the Conjuring universe.
Wait, what? What else is there? What else is there?
There's The Conjuring,
Okay.
Annabelle, The
Okay.
Conjuring 2, Annabelle Creation, The Nun, The Curse of La Llorona, and Annabelle Comes Home.
Oh, wait, the La Llorona movie is a Conjuring movie?
It is in the Conjuring universe, yes.
No idea.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, well then we'll skip that. We can skip it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Sorry.
I'm whatever. Every other week is enough. So yeah. Anyway, if you want to
be back with on the week of the 11th, we'll be back with In the Heights.
Oh yeah. Anyway, if you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter at CineSnob, Facebook CineSnobNet, YouTube.com/CineSnob is where all these video podcasts live. You got some interviews on there too. Other podcasts, you know the drill. We haven't done one in a while, so they're out there still. Cody, you got the Ramble still?
Yeah, Rambles. We're trying to do because Jerry's in chemo, so we're trying to keep a schedule as much as we can. So at least radio's on Tuesdays and Fridays for now, and hopefully regular rambles on Wednesdays. Good old Hunting's on the shelf for a little while, but we will come back to it at some point.
Cool. Yeah. Anything else before we go?
No, I don't think so. It was. It's good to have you back at the theaters, Jared.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
And I know you'll be there again for F9. So.
Yeah, I did get a screening invite for In the Heights, but I was like, I'm just gonna wait till it comes out on HBO Max, and I'm just gonna watch it at home.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it yet. But I saw it a while ago.
Oh yeah.
So, I don't think I might rewatch it. I don't know. We'll see.
Whatever, man.
All of the big we follow some circles who will demand that you see it in the theater.
Oh, I know. I've seen it already. I
Yeah.
don't care.
That's fair.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. On that note, I'm Jared Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafania.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.